Bruh, the way Blizzard went groveling back to China after that Hearthstone controversy, where the champion expressed support for solidarity with Hong Kong, and then they promptly stripped him of his money, kicked him out for a year, and fired the television presenters that had nothing to do with the matter. It's pretty pathetic. Same with the Houston Rockets. Yikes. You know, we in the United States have been having a lot of discussions about cancel culture lately. And it's almost like China went, hold my beer, boys. Show you how it's done. It's quite terrifying, almost, I think is the word, to see China flex its capitalist muscles in the goal of crushing dissent or controlling a narrative. I compiled a list of everything that China has done recently to American companies to censor or control narratives. And you can see quite how much power China's market exerts, bending American companies to its will. And I want to talk a little bit about the historical precedent for this, because I'm not an economist, but I know a little bit of history, and there's historical parallels for what's going on. So here's a quick list. Of course, I get a text. Blizzard, of course, banned its player for supporting the Hong Kong democracy protest. Apple censors Taiwan flag emoji on its iOS in Hong Kong. Apple censored Hong Kong protest map from App Store, relented after it turned into a PR mess. Now it lets the app back on the App Store. Vans censors pro-Hong Kong democracy design in a shoe design competition. Some people sent in pro-Hong Kong shoe designs to Vans, and Vans was like, yo, if we just lost these, right in the shredder. Oh, we didn't get anything in Hong Kong. NBA, rebuke Rockets manager, of course, for his pro-Hong Kong tweet. And then the NBA, of course, said, quote, extremely disappointed with Maury's inappropriate comment. Was it really that inappropriate, or did China just say, hey, we have a massive market, we'd hate to cut you out of it? It's like an Italian, not Italian, like a mobster team. They knock, knock, hate for anything to happen to your business. Like a catch fire. Better do what we want. But let's keep going. Disney, ESPN forbids any mention of Chinese politics when discussing Rockets manager and pro-Hong Kong tweet. ESPN hosts castigated Maury and speculated about his sincerity, but they will not talk about what caused the tweet, e.g. China's encroachment on Hong Kong. So Disney gave a direct mandate towards ESPN when discussing the NBA controversy to not give any context as to why Maury might be tweeting about the Hong Kong protests. Viacom Paramount censors Taiwan flag from the jacket worn by Tom Cruise in the new Top Gun movie. That's right. China got a kind of early release of the new Top Gun movie, and he had Tom Cruise on his leather jacket, his cool leather jacket, had a patch, as you do when you're a punk rocker like Tom Cruise, and he had a patch of the Taiwan flag. China saw an early release of the movie and said, you want to show that movie in China? 1.4 billion eyeballs? It will actually be 2.8 billion eyeballs. 2.8 billion eyeballs? You're going to have to be changing that flag. Which seems silly. It seems so trivial, but it shows you how willing even major movie studios are willing to change small things in the movie that should be immaterial purely because China's like, hey, change it. The list goes on. Disney Marvel censored Tibetan monk from Doctor Strange and turned him into a white woman. Per the movie's screenwriter, quote, if you acknowledge that Tibet is a place and that he's Tibetan, you risk alienating 1 billion people who think that's, quote, BS. So, well, I guess we won't acknowledge that he's Tibetan. Some clothing fashion companies, ASICS, Calvin Klein, Coach, Fresh, Givenchy. You can show my Midwest roots. I can't pronounce half these fancy clothing companies. Porcari Sweat, Valentino, Versace, Swarovski. They all removed any sort of designs for Hong Kong. Marriott, of course, apologized to China and changed, quote, Taiwan to Taiwan, China, after China pointed out that, hey, Marriott, why are you showing in your hotels that you have a hotel in Taiwan? Taiwan is obviously part of China, so it should be China. What did Marriott do? Change it to China. Just keep going with the list, though. This is like it just took a day to compile. I'm sure this is not an exhaustive list. Nike removed all Houston Rockets products from their China web store. Apple handed over iCloud data and encryption keys to China. Now, they fought vigorously, and I think rightfully so, in the United States to protect those iPhones, even when it was the CIA or the FBI wanted desperately the back-end encryption code for the iPhone to get into the San Bernardino attackers. And they fought on principle. China, forget it. Cathay Pacific fired employees for Facebook posts supporting Hong Kong protests. Apple minimized the seriousness of the iOS exploits that enabled China to track Uyghurs when over 1 million of them are rounded up by China and are essentially, let's be honest, in concentration camps. Yes, we can debate the term concentration camps, but from the satellite imagery, I think it's safe to say they're concentrating in those camps. Google censored pro-Hong Kong game The Revolution of Our Times from Google Play because it was a sensitive event. Google Play was like, yeah, we better not have this. Mercedes apologized for, quote, hurting the feelings of the people of China for quoting Dalai Lama on Instagram. Mercedes quoted the Dalai Lama. China's like, what are you doing? He's Tibetan. Remember how we feel about Tibet? Mercedes is like, oh yeah, that's right. We gotta clean up our Instagram act. American Airlines, Delta, United, even Delta, my beloved Delta, deleted any mention of Taiwan as a country from their websites after China gave them the order. Well, I guess all flights lead to China now, and they're not going to Taiwan. Audi apologized for using, quote, an incorrect geographical map of China that left off Taiwan. Muji destroyed store catalogs that contain a, quote, incorrect map of China. Basically, these incorrect map of China's are either maps that show Taiwan as a separate country or maps that show China without Taiwan. TikTok censored videos that mention Tiananmen Square, Tibetan independence, and banned the religious group the Falun Gong. So TikTok's they're like, we gotta get those eyeballs. Sheraton, the beloved Sheraton hotels, banned Taiwan National Day event after China embassy gave it the order. China called the Taiwan National Day celebration, quote, illegal and a crime against international law. Yes, the Sheraton's Taiwan National Day event, a crime against international law. But Sheraton folded like a wet rag. Even the beloved Tiffany Diamonds on Fifth Avenue, New York City, removed a tweet showing a model covering one eye after China accused it of supporting the Hong Kong protest. Is this even remotely indicative of the Hong Kong protest? Who knows? But did it remotely offend China? Yeah. So what did Tiffany do? Of course, Kate, remove the ad. Marriott fired an employee who liked a tweet from the Tibetan group. True story. Yeah, a couple other journalists double-checked that to verify that was indeed true. It was indeed true. Marriott just straight up fired an employee for liking a tweet in support of Tibet. So that's a certainly not an exhaustive list, although I just rambled on there for several minutes about all these small ways that China flexes its capitalistic might to control narratives, even narratives that are outside its country, like in the United States. And this may seem entirely new or scary, and it's certainly scary, but it reminds me personally a lot of the 1980s. In the 1980s, Japan was in a very particular position in the United States. After the Bayh-Dole Act, which allowed publicly funded research to be monetized, like the intellectual property from publicly funded research at universities and individuals could monetize it and sell it, and the fact that there wasn't a lot of venture capital meant that Japan got wise. And so what they started doing was buying up all the software and hardware companies in the United States and buying up all the research that was being publicly funded by U.S. taxpayers from universities like Stanford or USC or Berkeley. We would come up with some sort of new cool computer chip, and Japan would swipe in there, would fly in there and buy it. And in doing so, as they were acquiring all these American companies, Japan was just buying American company after American company after American company. It really started to worry a lot of people in the United States, particularly as, Japan owned 30% of all the latest new American companies that had formed in the 1980s. They were starting to exert quite a large influence on the press and the media and the perception of anything that seemed anti-Japan was xenophobic, was racist. And so then they started putting weight on the LA Times, on the San Francisco Chronicle. During the 1980s, this was a big thing where Japan was able to wield its economic power to carry forward narratives in the American public and acquire quite a bit of American companies. And you're seeing the same thing with China. Part of the reason why the Houston Rockets are caving is because China puts a lot of money into the NBA. China puts a lot of money, like Tencent, I think controls 40% of Snapchat. Like China has its back end in a lot of American companies and in a lot of American media. So what does the future look like? Well, I don't know. What happened in the 1980s is that eventually the Japanese economy collapsed, and the ultimate fear is that Japan would kind of totally dominate American companies and the American narrative, so to speak, like we're seeing here in China doing. In many ways, China's taking a playbook out of Japan. What Japan did in the 1980s, China's just doing it slightly more effectively because China's way bigger than Japan. I don't know. Perhaps the Chinese economy will eventually stall like Japan did too, and we're just in a transitory phase where China is able to exert an undue influence on the United States. Or not. China is indeed a very large, very powerful country. And without perhaps the United States government stepping in, I know regulations may not be the best thing, but without a watchful eye from the U.S. government protecting American companies and American media from investments from China that would otherwise compromise their ability to act independently from what the Beijing government wants, which is a very verbose way of saying, without the United States government making sure companies, like American companies like Snapchat or the NBA, can't take on too much money from China without it them compromising their integrity as an American company, meaning like, hey, you know what, Snapchat or the NBA, we don't know that $10 billion contract's great, or them buying 40% of your company should be allowed, because if they can buy 40% of your company, you're going to be in a very weak position to negotiate against them if they want something done. And the Beijing government is often in competition with the United States government. So we'll see what happens. But this is a very, very curious time. Curious to see what you guys think. It's interesting to see the various ways media is covering it. I think the best analogy so far that comes to my mind is the kind of Japanese Kaizen era when they were just dominating the west coast of America and really, really buying up American companies and controlling media narratives. You can look into it, look into Japanese-American relationships in the 1980s. It's a fascinating history in the kind of international geopolitics between Eastern and Western nations. Thanks for watching, guys. See you tomorrow. Click like or subscribe if you found this interesting or my list not too tedious. Thanks for watching. Bye.